When I was young, a little girl, I didn't know where to go. And then you came and showed me love.
By the turn of the 20th century, many states had enacted Jim Crow laws, which were named for a song sung by white minstrel characters of the mid-1800s who imitated popular Negro crooning and dancing. Jim Crow laws were passed by southern states in order to create a racial caste system. By 1914, laws effectively created two separate societies, one Caucasian and one non-Caucasian. They could not ride alongside whites in the same rail car, sit in the same waiting room, same theater, attend the same schools, or dine in the same places. Type things like Rosa Parks' refusal to give up her bus seat to a white man in 1955 sparked intense protests by whites and concerned blacks. As the civil rights movement began to start, the intensity would only grow larger. The encounter between the media and freedom riders led to a historic time period engulfed in violence and relentlessness that led to equality and justice for all. Organizations influential in the civil rights movement include the SNCC and the NAACP. The NAACP, or the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, was founded in 1909 and also was one of the first organizations developed to campaign for equality. SNCC, or Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, spread the idea of reserve segregation by staging a sit-in
at Woolworth lunch counter.
February 13th was our first sit-in Nashville. On the sit-in, we had about 130 kids. I think on this day, many of us didn't realize just how important our movement would grow to be.
The targets of the Nashville students were the lunch counters at the city's two largest department stores and 4 variety stores. And for the first time, the community was confronted with Negroes in places where they had never been.
Altogether, it was a moving feeling within me that I was sitting there demanding a God-given right, and my soul became satisfied that I was right in what I was doing. At the same time, was something deep down within me, moving me, that I could no longer be satisfied or go along with an evil system, that I had to be maladjusted to it. And in spite of all of this, I had to keep loving the people who denied me service, who
March 13, 1961, James Farmer, the newly appointed director of CORE, issued a statement asking for volunteers to participate in a freedom ride that would test racial discrimination in interstate terminals philosophies. The ride lasted from April 9th to the 23rd. However, the journey was unable to catch any media attention. During the Journey of Reconciliation in 1961, 6 white volunteers and 8 black volunteers set out for the same cities as before. They not only planned to go against segregation laws on buses, but also in waiting rooms, restrooms, and terminal restaurants. Violence erupted when John Lewis, a black volunteer, was brutally beaten by a group of white males. Lewis, however, wasn't the only volunteer that was
Severely beaten.
Albert Bigelow was also cruelly beaten. They set out for Sumter, Camden, Augustus, and Athens. Now missing 2 members who had been arrested, they regrouped before entering Alabama and Mississippi. Upon arrival in Anniston, Alabama, the riders were greeted by a very angry, vicious mob, which damaged and set fire to the bus. The injured riders, who suffered cuts and bruises, as well as smoke inhalation, were also denied services by local hospitals. From Anniston, they traveled to Birmingham, Alabama. There, another mob awaited them. Riders were unable to find a bus that would let them board, and on May 17th, the disgruntled group of riders disbanded in New Orleans, where they boarded an airplane chartered by the Justice Department. However, the journey of reconciliation was not over. Because of the media attention surrounding the bus trip, the SNCC decided to take over. The SNCC recruited a handful of sit-in veterans and sent them to Birmingham. And on May 20th, a group of 21 Freedom Riders boarded a bus to Birmingham. Once inside Montgomery city limits, the riders' bus was surrounded by nearly 300 people, some of which violently beat the riders. As time continued, the crowd would swarm to 1,000 people. Police and firefighters were supported in their actions by local judges prohibiting protest marches. That night, the attack of Jim Zwerg, a white exchange student who attended Fisk University, interview was broadcasted across the country. From his hospital bed, he recounted the horrific cruelty.
Segregation must be stopped. It must be broken down. Those of us who are on the Freedom Ride, who will continue the Freedom Ride, I'm not sure that I'll be able to, but we're going on to New Orleans, no matter what happens. We're dedicated to this. We'll take hitting, we'll take beating. We're willing to accept death. But we're going to keep coming until we can ride from anywhere in the South to any place else in the South without anybody making any comments, just as American citizens.
Photographs of Jim Zwerg after the riots were published nationwide in Time, Life, and Associated Press newspapers. This allowed writers to observe the attention they got and further their fight for racial equality. Freedom Riders emphasized the strong need to put a stop to violence by capitalizing on the attention from police brutality. The terrible events that occurred that day, as well as the callous indifference of the Alabama government, made that Freedom Ride front-page newspapers displayed the burning and bloodshed which played up the white South's blatant and cruel defiance of the law. Major leaders who participated in Freedom Rides and fought for equality include James Farmer, Huey Newton, Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Ralph Abernathy, Charles F. Mutu, and many more. Throughout the 1960s, bus-riding Freedom Riders, marchers, boycotters, and other protesters continued their crusade for freedom and were met with fierce resistance. Riots, bombings, beatings, and shootings were common as growing thousands of civil rights protesters marched throughout the South and in many cases the North as well.
The encounter between the media and Freedom Riders led to the exchange of new ideas of how to project civil rights movement's philosophies via the media. The encounter also led to later marches, sit-ins, boycotts, and laws, including the Civil Rights Act of 1965, finally granting equal rights for all.